Emily Carter never imagined that a quiet afternoon in her Los Angeles suburban home would turn into a nightmare so brutal it would shake the walls of her entire life. She was 32 weeks pregnant, exhausted from juggling late-night feedings for her 7-month-old son Noah, and trying to keep her breath steady as she carried him across the living room. Outside, a thin gray drizzle coated the windows, making the house feel smaller, as if the sky itself was warning her to be careful. Ryan, her husband, paced around pretending to tidy up the shelves, while Chloe, the woman Emily still believed was just Ryan's fitness partner, stood too close, watching with a strange, unreadable smile. Emily tightened her hold on Noah when she saw Ryan inspecting the tall wooden cabinet they had bought secondhand months ago. It was heavy, old, and never fully secured to the wall. She had reminded Ryan many times to anchor it properly, but he always brushed her off. Today, however, he seemed overly focused on it, pulling the drawers open and closed as if testing something. Chloe leaned her elbow against the counter, tapping her nails softly, her eyes fixated on Emily rather than the cabinet. "Can you hand me that box up there?" Ryan asked, pointing to the very top shelf. Emily hesitated. She felt her lower back throb, her swollen belly tightening. Noah pressed his tiny face against her shoulder, sensing her unease. But Ryan's voice sharpened the kind of tone that made her shrink inside. She inched closer to the cabinet. The floor creaked as she reached up. Noah let out a small whimper. Emily whispered, "It's okay, baby," even though she didn't believe it herself. She climbed a little higher on her toes and touched the edge of the box. Suddenly, behind her, she heard Chloe say quietly, "Now." Emily froze. She turned her head slightly, catching a fragment of a glance, Ryan's hand shifting, Chloe's foot pushing subtly against the base. Something was wrong. A heavy dread spread through her body, stronger than the pain, stronger than the fear she had lived with for months. "Ryan?" she whispered. But the cabinet was already moving. It tilted first, a slow, unnatural motion that made her gasp. She clutched Noah tighter, stumbling backward. Ryan didn't reach out to help. Chloe didn't shout a warning. Emily's heartbeat thundered in her ears as the cabinet groaned, its weight shifting forward, the old wood cracking like a beast about to lunge. "No, please, Noah," she cried, twisting her body so she could shield her baby. The cabinet crashed down onto her back with a violent thud that echoed through the living room. Pain exploded across her spine, her ribs, her belly. Noah screamed, his tiny arms flailing. Emily fell to her knees, then onto her side, trying desperately to keep the weight off his fragile body. Her breath collapsed into short, broken gasps. Ryan took a single step back. Chloe covered her mouth with a hand that hid a small, triumphant smirk. Emily's vision blurred. Her fingers trembled as she reached out toward her phone on the floor, inches beyond her grasp. She could taste blood in her mouth. Yet the worst was not the pain. It was the moment she realized Ryan and Chloe were not panicking. They were watching, waiting, almost calculating. Emily forced out a broken whisper. "Help, please." Utterly frozen. And 3,000 miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking Manhattan, Richard Carter opened the live feed on his iPad and saw his daughter pinned beneath a collapsing cabinet. He watched Ryan take one step closer. Emily had once believed that love could shelter her from every storm. 2 years earlier, long before the cabinet, long before the bruises, and long before the subtle fear that followed her like a shadow, she had walked into a glamorous ballroom in Beverly Hills wearing a simple ivory dress that made her feel timeless. Ryan smiled at her from across the aisle, the lights from the chandelier reflecting in his eyes like they held entire galaxies. Guests whispered about how perfect they looked. Camera flashes popped around them, capturing what everyone thought was the start of something beautiful. Her father, Richard Carter, had flown from New York with his board of directors pressing for his attention, but he put everything aside for that day. He placed a delicate Tiffany bracelet on Emily's wrist and told her, "If you ever feel lost, this will remind you that you always have a home." She hugged him tightly, believing she would never need the reminder. Ryan had charmed the entire crowd with stories about his real estate success, deals he claimed were about to make headlines, and investors he said admired his ambition. Emily didn't notice the way he kept glancing at his iPhone, reading messages he refused to explain. She didn't notice how often he scanned the room as if searching for someone else. She didn't know Chloe was there that night, weaving between tables, pretending to be another smiling guest. During the first dance, Ryan held Emily close, whispering that he would give her the world. Emily pressed her cheek to his shoulder, ignoring the strange hollowness in his voice. Her friends told her she glowed. Her father watched with hopeful eyes, thinking she had finally found a man who would cherish her. The warmth of that night felt eternal. But within months, the cracks began forming. Ryan drank more. He stayed out late. His temper sharpened. Emily tried to blame stress, deadlines, and pressure. She convinced herself that every insult was just a man struggling under burdens he wouldn't share. She kept trying to be patient, to be supportive, to be the wife she had promised to be. Yet, even in those early days, she felt small moments of dread she could never explain. Like the time she reached for Ryan's phone, and he snatched it away so fast she flinched. Or the night she overheard him whispering in the garage, his voice low and urgent, saying a woman's name he quickly denied. But Emily pushed each fear down, burying them under hope. Maybe all marriages had rough edges. Maybe love just needed time. Meanwhile, Richard sensed something off each time she called. Her voice held a tremor she tried to hide, a tiredness that didn't match the life she said she was living. He asked if she was truly happy. Emily answered yes, always yes, even when her heart whispered no. She remembered standing in their living room just weeks after the wedding, staring at the cabinet Ryan insisted they keep. It felt too heavy, too towering, almost looming. He had brushed her concerns away, laughing at her worry. She remembered feeling a strange coldness then, as if the house itself knew something she didn't. But she stayed. She believed, she hoped, until the day hope itself began to die. A memory she once clung to as happiness now unraveled, revealing a truth she had never wanted to see. The dream she married into had been a trap from the very beginning for her life. From the outside, the Carters' home in the quiet suburbs of Los Angeles looked like a picture of peaceful family life. The white picket fence, the manicured lawn, and the soft glow from the living room windows suggested comfort and stability. Neighbors often commented that Emily was lucky married to a handsome real estate agent, living in a warm home with a healthy baby boy. But inside those walls, the truth was far heavier than anyone knew. Every morning, Emily woke up before dawn to feed Noah, rubbing her tired eyes as she prepared his bottle. She would look over at Ryan, still asleep, sprawled across the bed with his arm hanging off the edge. He often returned late from client meetings, smelling faintly of cologne that didn't belong to her. She wanted to ask, to confront him, but every time she opened her mouth, fear tightened her throat. She had learned quickly that Ryan didn't like questions. Still, she tried to keep life steady. While Noah napped, she opened her old MacBook Air to finish leftover design projects for clients she didn't want to disappoint. Her passion for interior design once gave her direction, a sense of identity. But now she worked in silence, her creativity dimmed by exhaustion. Every time she looked at the unfinished plans on her screen, she wondered if she was slowly fading from the world she used to know. Ryan, meanwhile, moved through the house with an air of self-importance. He spoke constantly about deals he claimed he was closing, listings he said were worth millions, and clients who supposedly adored him. He walked with the pride of someone who believed the world owed him something. Emily once admired that confidence, thinking it meant he had vision. Now it felt like arrogance, a mask hiding cracks she didn't yet understand. When he left the house, he took his sleek black car and put on the persona of a successful man with a busy schedule. But Emily noticed the inconsistencies. The days he claimed to be at the office, when the office called saying he hadn't checked in. The weekends he insisted on running showings, even though the real estate market was slow. The sudden change in passwords on his phone. Yet she ignored them. For Noah. For the baby growing inside her, for the promise she made on her wedding day in Beverly Hills. She wanted to believe Ryan could still be the man she married. Afternoons were the hardest. Emily often stood by the window, holding Noah while rocking gently from side to side. She watched kids ride their bikes and parents walking dogs, all looking so carefree. She envied their simplicity. She wished she could step outside without feeling the weight of Ryan's schedule, Ryan's moods, Ryan's expectations pressing on her chest. He didn't want her seeing friends, claiming it was too tiring for a pregnant woman. He didn't want her visiting her father in New York, insisting the baby needed consistency. Even grocery trips became monitored. Emily found herself shrinking, her world reduced to the walls of their home and the cries of her baby boy. One evening, Emily asked Ryan if they could anchor the tall wooden cabinet to the wall, after noticing it wobble when she pulled out Noah's toys. He waved her off, saying she worried too much. She tried again, softly, hoping he would understand her concern. Instead, he snapped that he didn't have time for her irrational fears. Emily bit her tongue and looked down at her belly, gently smoothing her hand over it as she whispered to the baby inside. She wanted to keep her children safe. She wanted stability, but something deep inside whispered that the danger wasn't the cabinet, it was the man refusing to secure it. Late that night, as she lay awake listening to the distant hum of the Los Angeles skyline, she wondered how many pieces of her life had quietly shattered without her noticing. Her heartbeat raced with a growing truth she could no longer deny. The life she thought she was protecting might already be slipping beyond saving. In New York City, far from the quiet Los Angeles neighborhood where Emily lived, her father, Richard Carter, carried a reputation that echoed through corporate boardrooms like a steady drumbeat of authority. At 58, he was the kind of CEO whose calm presence could silence a room without raising his voice. His office sat high above Park Avenue, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting. The city moved below him, taxis weaving, lights flickering, life pulsing, but Richard worked with unwavering focus, the weight of leadership resting naturally on his shoulders. Yet beneath his powerful exterior lived a quiet ache, the distance between him and his only daughter. He had raised Emily alone after her mother passed, pouring every bit of love he had into her childhood. When she married Ryan, Richard stepped back, wanting to give her space to build a family of her own. But the space between them grew wider than he expected, filled with canceled visits, short phone calls, and reassurances from Emily that always felt too practiced. Still, he trusted her words, believing she had found stability with Ryan in California. On this particular morning, Richard sat at his polished desk, reviewing quarterly forecasts displayed on his MacBook Pro. A Mont Blanc pen rested between his fingers as he made notes in the margins of printed reports. Everything about his environment radiated control. The soft hum of the air system, the muted chatter from assistants outside, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him. But even inside this fortress of calm, Richard felt something uneasy tugging at him. Emily's last call replayed in his memory, her voice thin, her laughter forced, her pauses slightly too long. He had asked if she needed anything, and as always, she insisted she was fine. But Richard had spent a lifetime reading people, and he knew when someone was hiding behind their words. He stared at the framed photograph on his shelf, Emily in her wedding dress, radiant, hopeful, unaware of the storm that would come. He touched the edge of the frame gently, wishing she would tell him everything she held inside. Just then, his iPad lit up with a notification from the home security app Emily had set up shortly after Noah was born. He almost ignored it, assuming it was one of the usual motion alerts or a delivery at her doorstep. But something made him open it, perhaps instinct or that same uneasy pull he had felt all morning. The live feed loaded slowly, pixels shifting before forming the familiar image of Emily's living room. He saw Noah in her arms, her posture strained, her back slightly arched as she reached toward the top shelf of that unstable wooden cabinet. His brows knitted as he leaned closer, sensing danger even before understanding it. Then he noticed Ryan and Chloe standing too still, too close, their expressions unsettlingly calm. Something inside, Richard snapped awake, an instinct sharpened by years of protecting what he loved. His pulse quickened as he watched Ryan whisper something to Chloe, watched their hands shift, watched the cabinet begin to tremble at its base. The room in New York grew silent around him, every sound drowned out by the dread forming in his chest. Richard leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk as if bracing himself for what was about to unfold. In that single breath of time, he understood that something was terribly, dangerously wrong, and the realization struck him harder than any business crisis he had ever faced. He feared what the next second would reveal to him now. The earliest warning signs didn't arrive as bruises or slammed doors. They came quietly like faint cracks in a foundation that only reveal their danger after the whole house starts to shake. Emily remembered the first time she felt something shift inside her marriage. Noah was barely 2 months old, and the long nights had blurred into one another. She made coffee in the kitchen, her hands trembling from exhaustion, when Ryan walked in wearing a crisp white shirt that looked impossibly expensive. She reached across the counter, trying not to spill the cup as she handed it to him, but the liquid splashed onto his sleeve. Ryan froze, his jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, as if she had ruined something precious to him. Emily whispered an apology, offering to wash the shirt, but Ryan stepped forward and grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise immediately, but with a pressure that made her heart skip. He hissed that she was careless, that she never paid attention, that motherhood had made her slow. Emily stood there, stunned. Noah began crying in the next room, and the sound snapped her back. She pulled her wrist gently from his grip and hurried to the baby, murmuring soft words of comfort to drown out the ones Ryan had thrown at her. She didn't tell her father. She didn't even write it in her journal. She convinced herself Ryan was simply stressed, overwhelmed, tired. People snapped sometimes. It didn't mean they didn't love you, but the moments grew more frequent. There were days when Emily moved too slowly for his liking, days when her body, heavy with pregnancy and drained by sleepless nights, couldn't keep up with his demands. He criticized the way she folded laundry, the meals she cooked, the mess he claimed she made, even when the house was spotless. He never shouted. He used quieter tools, sharper ones: silence, disapproval, coldness that settled over the room like frost on a winter morning. One afternoon, while receiving a package on the porch, an Amazon box filled with baby supplies, Emily winced when she bent down to pick it up. Sarah, the neighbor with kind eyes and a gentle voice, happened to be watering plants nearby. She noticed Emily's limp, the way Emily winced when shifting her weight. Sarah asked softly if she was okay. Emily forced a smile and blamed it on stairs or pregnancy aches. But Sarah didn't look convinced. That same evening, Emily found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She lifted her sleeve and saw a faint discoloration on her wrist, the mark Ryan had left. Panic shot through her chest. She pulled her sleeve down quickly, even though she was alone, as if hiding the truth from herself might erase it. The wooden cabinet in the living room wobbled that night when she opened one of the bottom drawers. A small rattle rolled across the floor, and she bent down slowly, placing a hand on her belly. She made a mental note to ask Ryan again to secure the cabinet to the wall. It wasn't safe, with a baby learning to crawl. But when she brought it up, Ryan dismissed her fear with a wave, claiming she exaggerated everything. Emily walked away, clutching her stomach, a heavy feeling blooming inside her, not physical pain, but something deeper. Something that told her she wasn't imagining the danger. It was real, it was growing, and she felt it circling her slowly, like a storm building on the horizon. Still, she stayed silent. Still, she hoped. But each day, each bruise too faint to name, each bruise too hidden to show, whispered the same terrifying truth. Something in her home had begun to turn against her, and it wasn't just the man she married. The first time Emily met Chloe outside of quick hallway greetings, it was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Ryan had come home early, unusually cheerful, carrying a bag of takeout as if he wanted to play the role of a devoted husband. Emily was feeding Noah in the living room when the doorbell rang. Ryan rushed to answer it, and before Emily could get up, Chloe stepped inside tall, perfectly put together, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that gave her a polished, almost intimidating beauty. "Oh my gosh, Emily," Chloe exclaimed, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged in the room. "I've heard so much about you." Emily blinked, unsure how to respond. She forced a polite smile, the kind she had learned to wear whenever Ryan's moods confused her. Noah shifted in her arms, and Chloe leaned slightly closer, as if observing the baby more than greeting her mother. "I brought a little toy for him," Chloe said, pulling a small rattle shaped like a star from her purse. She shook it gently, smiling at Noah, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile that felt rehearsed, like something worn for show, rather than warmth. Emily thanked her, though something about the gesture made her uneasy. Chloe's gaze lingered too long on her belly, then drifted across the living room, as if assessing the home, not admiring it, but evaluating it. The way a real estate agent would examine a property before listing it. When her eyes paused on the tall wooden cabinet, a flicker of interest passed across her face. "You have such a lovely home," Chloe said casually, her attention still on the cabinet. "It must be so convenient." Convenient for what? Emily wondered. Ryan clapped his hands slightly, interrupting. "Chloe's been helping me with my fitness routine," he said quickly. "She's practically my coach." Coach. The word sounded wrong. Chloe didn't look like she spent time counting reps or handing out protein shakes. She looked like she belonged in hotel lounges, cocktail events, and rooftop bars, not gyms. But Emily nodded politely, because she had learned that questioning Ryan only led to cold silences or sharp words. As the afternoon dragged on, Chloe stayed longer than Emily expected. She laughed loudly at Ryan's jokes, stood overly close when he talked, and brushed dust off his shoulder more times than necessary. Emily felt invisible in her own home, reduced to holding her baby and smiling politely while a stranger took up space beside her husband. When Emily excused herself to change Noah's diaper, she paused in the hallway, listening. She heard Chloe's voice drop into a softer, more intimate tone. Ryan murmured something back. Then, a faint sound like a giggle, too close, too familiar. Emily's stomach tightened, though she forced herself to believe she had misheard. Later that evening, when Chloe finally left, Emily noticed the way Ryan watched her walk to her car. Too long, too quietly, with a kind of hunger she hadn't seen directed at her in months. That night, while Emily washed Noah's bottles in the kitchen, she overheard Ryan on the phone. He was in the garage again, his private space. She stepped closer, holding her breath. "She bought it," he whispered sharply. "Stop worrying," I said. "She bought it." Emily's heart hammered. She stepped away before she could hear more, gripping the counter until her knuckles turned white. She didn't know what scared her more, what Ryan was hiding, or the terrifying suspicion that Chloe wasn't just part of his lies. She might be part of his plans. And Emily had no idea how much danger had already stepped inside her home. Emily didn't notice when the walls of her life began to close in. It happened slowly, almost gently, the way fog rolls in until you realize you can't see anything clearly anymore. It began with Ryan saying he wanted to help her manage her stress. Then it became helping her manage her schedule. And eventually, helping her manage her entire life. "You shouldn't worry about bills right now," he told her one morning while buttoning his shirt. "You're pregnant. You're exhausted. Let me take care of everything." He said it sweetly, brushing a kiss onto her forehead. Emily wanted to believe him. She wanted to think he cared. But something in his tone felt rehearsed, like a script he'd memorized. Within days, Ryan suggested they merge all their accounts. "It's easier," he said with an easy smile. "One family, one financial system." Emily hesitated. She had a small account her mother once opened for her, a quiet place she saved bits of money from design projects. Something about closing it felt like erasing a piece of herself. But Ryan insisted, and every refusal led to tension. She eventually agreed, convincing herself it was logical. The next week, he changed the passwords to their shared banking app. "Fraud protection," he said casually when she asked. "Don't worry, babe, I've got it." He also stopped letting her drive. At first, he used Noah as an excuse, too risky with the baby. Then, it was the pregnancy. "You're tired. You could lose focus." Then one day he took her car key off the hook entirely. She searched the house but never found it again. Her world grew smaller, just the house, Noah's nursery, the living room where the cabinet loomed. Friends from her design school texted sometimes, but Ryan always interrupted when she tried to call them back. "You don't need people filling your head with nonsense," he said. "I'm your family now. Focus on us." Whenever her father asked to video call, Ryan always had a reason to avoid it. Time zones, the baby's cranky, we're busy. Emily tried to push back once, but Ryan's eyes went cold, and she dropped it. One afternoon, while organizing Noah's clothes, Emily felt a strange shiver as she realized she didn't know the last time she had been outside alone. Days blurred together in silence, broken only by her baby's cries and Ryan's voice reminding her what she could or couldn't do. Then came the night she overheard him on the phone. His voice was urgent, low, the way it always was when he thought she was asleep. "She's isolated now," he whispered. "Yeah, she doesn't talk to anyone. No accounts, no car, no support. She's not going anywhere." Emily's heart stopped. She stepped into the hallway, her hands sweating. She told herself she misunderstood, that he meant something else. Anything else. But the tone in his voice was unmistakable, strategic, calculating, final. The next morning, Chloe arrived unannounced with coffee and a bright smile. She walked through the house as if inspecting it again, pausing at the cabinet with a look Emily couldn't decipher. "You're so lucky Ryan takes care of everything," Chloe said sweetly. "Most men don't know how to plan ahead." Plan. The word chilled Emily. That night, Emily searched for her old savings account card, the one from her mother, but it was gone from the drawer where she kept important papers. She tore the bedroom apart, panic rising, but it had vanished. She sat on the floor, holding her belly, feeling her baby kick weakly beneath her hand. For the first time, truly and painfully, she realized Ryan wasn't helping her. He was trapping her, and the door to her world had already been locked from the outside. It happened on a Thursday night, one of those evenings when the air felt strangely heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. Emily had spent the entire day trying to soothe Noah, who had been feverish since morning. Her back ached, her belly felt tight, and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. She kept glancing at the front door, wishing Ryan would come home early to help, but of course, he didn't. When he finally walked in past 9 p.m., Emily could smell the lie before he even opened his mouth, a faint trace of unfamiliar perfume. It clung to his shirt, mixing with the scent of alcohol. She stood at the kitchen counter, warming a bottle for Noah, her body tense. He didn't greet her. He didn't ask about the baby. He just brushed past her to grab a drink. "Where were you?" Emily asked softly, hoping her voice didn't shake. Ryan didn't look at her. "Work dinner." Emily watched him over the glow of the bottle warmer. "You smell like perfume." He froze, turning slowly. His face darkened in a way that made her chest tighten. "Don't start," he snapped. "I'm not starting anything," she whispered. Noah's been sick. I was worried, and You're always worried," he cut in, stepping closer. "Always imagining things, always needing something. Do you know how exhausting that is?" Emily swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if he meant to raise his voice or if it simply rose on its own, but the next words fell out of her before she could stop them. "I found lipstick on your shirt last week." Silence. A thick, dangerous silence. Ryan stared at her, stunned not because she had discovered something, but because she finally dared to say it aloud. Emily felt her pulse hammer in her throat. Noah whimpered from his crib, sensing the tension. Ryan stepped forward so abruptly she flinched. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" he asked, his voice low, tight. "I'm not accusing you," Emily said, backing up until her hip hit the counter. "I'm just asking, please. You're gone so much. You don't talk to me anymore. You don't get to question me," he barked, gripping the edge of the counter beside her. "Everything you have comes from me. This house, that baby's clothes, the food you eat. You think you'd survive without me?" Emily gasped softly, hurt slicing through her chest like glass. Ryan had never said it so plainly before, though he'd hinted at it for months. "I'm your wife, Ryan," she whispered. "Not your burden." Ryan laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. He leaned in close enough for her to smell the bitterness on his breath. "You think you're special? You're not. You're just convenient." The word hit her like a slap. Convenient. Useful. Replaceable. Her eyes stung, but before she could respond, Noah's cry filled the room. Emily moved to pick him up, but Ryan grabbed the bottle from her hand and slammed it onto the counter. "I'm not done talking," he said. But Emily was. She clutched Noah tightly, as if shielding him from the poison in Ryan's voice. Something inside her cracked, not like glass, but like a fault line finally giving way after being pushed too far for too long. She felt her chest tighten, felt the baby inside her shift anxiously, felt her lungs beg for air. She realized, in that terrifying moment, that Ryan didn't love her. He didn't even see her. And when she looked into his eyes, for the first time, she saw something she had never allowed herself to see before. He was capable of hurting her. Not emotionally. Physically. She carried Noah upstairs with trembling arms, her heart pounding as she shut the bedroom door. She pressed her back against it, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And downstairs, in the darkness of the kitchen, Ryan whispered into his phone, and Emily heard Chloe's name. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet, too still, too heavy. Emily moved slowly through the kitchen, her back sore from another sleepless night. Noah had cried for hours, sensing her anxiety the way babies often do. She tried to distract herself, making oatmeal, warming bottles, folding tiny clothes. But Ryan's words from the night before clung to her like a bruise she couldn't see. Convenient. Replaceable. She whispered to herself to stay calm, but her hands trembled every time she remembered how close he'd stood, how cold his eyes had been. She kept glancing toward the garage, where she had heard him whisper Chloe's name. She wanted to pretend she misunderstood, but her instincts told her otherwise. Around noon, a sudden knock startled her. She peeked through the window and saw Sarah, the neighbor. The sight of her gentle face made something inside Emily soften. She opened the door, hugging Noah to her chest. "Hey," Sarah said softly, "I heard crying all night. Everything okay?" Emily tried to smile. "Rough night. He's teething." Sarah nodded, but her eyes scanned Emily's face, the dark circles, the tense shoulders, the way her hand hovered protectively over her belly. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Emily," she said quietly, "I know it's not my place, but you don't look okay." Emily opened her mouth to deny it, but her voice shook. "It's been stressful. Ryan's working a lot." Sarah hesitated, then took a breath. "Look, yesterday, I noticed the cabinet in your living room. It's dangerous. It could fall if someone even leans on it. You really need to anchor it." Emily stiffened. The cabinet. The same cabinet Chloe inspected days ago. The cabinet Ryan always dismissed concerns about. The cabinet that towered over her living room like a quiet threat. "I've told Ryan," Emily whispered. "He said he'll get to it." Sarah frowned. "Can I be honest? I don't think he will. And if something happened—" She glanced at Noah. "It wouldn't take much." Emily swallowed hard. Her heart pounded, and not from the pregnancy or exhaustion, but from a sense of dread creeping up her spine. Sarah gently touched her arm. "I also saw something else. The other day, when you picked up that package, you looked hurt, limping. Are you safe here?" Emily froze. She looked down. Her grip on Noah tightened. She wanted to scream yes, that she was fine, but instead, she whispered, "I don't know." Sarah nodded, as if she had been expecting that answer. "If you ever need a place to go, just knock on my door. Any hour. I mean it." A tremor went through Emily, part fear, part gratitude. No one had asked her that question. No one had noticed the things she tried so desperately to hide. She blinked back tears and managed a small nod. "Thank you," she whispered. After Sarah left, the house felt colder. Emily stared at the cabinet, its shadow stretching across the floor like a warning she should have listened to sooner. She hesitated, then picked up her phone, meaning to call her father. She typed, "Dad," her thumb trembling. But as she lifted the phone to press call, Ryan's car pulled into the driveway. Panic surged through her. She quickly hid her phone and retreated to the nursery. Ryan walked in minutes later, his smile stretched too wide, too controlled. "Everything okay?" he asked. Emily nodded, though her heart raced. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder light, almost gentle, but something in his touch made her shiver. That night, Emily lay awake listening to every sound. A creaking floorboard, a closing door, footsteps in the hallway. She couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't silence the voice in her head whispering that danger was no longer approaching. It was already here. And Emily had no idea the cabinet she feared most was about to become the weapon they chose. For weeks, Emily had been dreaming of escape, not running away forever, just a few days of peace, a chance to breathe. So when her father, Richard, called one evening and said he wanted her to visit New York, her heart fluttered with hope. He had booked her a room at a quiet boutique hotel overlooking Central Park, a place she used to love when she visited him before marriage. The plane ticket arrived in her email minutes later. Emily felt something she hadn't felt in months. Relief. She told Ryan about the trip while he was scrolling on his phone. She expected immediate resistance, but his reaction was strangely calm. Too calm. "New York?" he asked without looking up. "That's sudden." "I miss Dad," Emily said softly. "He wants to see Noah. And I think the break would help. The doctor said stress isn't good for the baby." Ryan exhaled sharply, as if the mention of stress annoyed him. Still, he didn't argue. "Fine," he said, setting his phone down. "If it's what you want." Emily blinked. It was the first time in months he had agreed to anything she wanted. A flicker of hope sparked inside her. Maybe he was trying. Maybe things could get better. That night, she began packing quietly small outfits for Noah. Prenatal vitamins, her old Kindle filled with books she hadn't touched in ages. She reached into her drawer for the Tiffany bracelet her father once gave her, the one she rarely wore now. Holding it made her chest ache with longing. She needed him. She needed safety. She needed time to understand the fear clawing inside her. For the first time in months, she let herself believe things might change. But the next morning, shattered that illusion. Ryan came home early from work, stepping through the door with a stiffness Emily had learned to read too well. Chloe followed behind him, wearing athletic clothes as if she had joined him for a morning workout. Emily's stomach knotted. She was feeding Noah when Ryan entered the kitchen. "About New York," he began. Emily froze. "I need you to cancel the trip." Her heart dropped. "What?" "Ryan, I already packed. Dad is expecting us." "The hotel." "We're not going," he said firmly. Emily's throat tightened. "You said it was fine." Ryan's eyes darkened. "I changed my mind." Chloe leaned casually against the counter, sipping from a water bottle. "Traveling during pregnancy can be dangerous," she added with fake concern. "Especially so far along." Emily stared at her, unable to speak. Chloe's presence felt wrong, too deliberate, too intrusive. "I'm 32 weeks, not helpless," Emily managed. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I need my wife here. If you leave now, it'll look bad. People will think something's wrong between us. Don't do that to me." To him? Not to the baby. Not to her health. To him? Emily felt her pulse pounding in her ears. "Please," she whispered. "I just want a few days to rest." Ryan's jaw clenched. "If you walk out of this house, don't expect to come back." The words hit her like a blow. She looked down at Noah, his tiny fingers wrapped around her shirt, unaware of the storm brewing around them. Her breath broke. Tears blurred her eyes. She thought of calling her father, telling him everything, but Ryan was standing too close, watching, waiting. Her hand reached for her phone on the table. Ryan grabbed it first. "You're staying," he said, pocketing it. Emily felt the world collapse around her. Chloe smirked behind him. That afternoon, Emily unpacked in silence, while Ryan acted as if nothing had happened. The suitcase sat open on the bed, filled with folded dreams she would not get to take with her. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in tighter, the air too still. She placed the Tiffany bracelet back in the drawer, her vision blurring. This was supposed to be her lifeline. Instead, Ryan had cut the last thread, tying her to safety. And somewhere deep inside, Emily knew canceling that trip wasn't a decision. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. The night air in Los Angeles was cool and still, but inside a dimly lit rooftop bar near West Hollywood, something dark was taking shape. Ryan sat in a corner booth, swirling a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Chloe slid into the seat across from him, crossing her legs with practiced grace. Soft jazz played overhead, the city lights glowing below them like fallen stars. But neither of them was looking at the skyline. They were focused only on the plan that had finally reached its breaking point. "We don't have time," Chloe whispered, leaning closer. "She's starting to ask questions." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "She's pregnant, emotional, it's just hormones." Chloe rolled her eyes. "It's not hormones when she saw lipstick on your shirt. And it's not hormones when she keeps bringing up that stupid cabinet. She's worried, she's alert. That's dangerous for us." Dangerous. The word lingered between them. Ryan's face hardened. "I told you I'll handle it." "No," Chloe said, lowering her voice. "You said you'd handle it months ago, but she's still here. And now her father is trying to get her back to New York. If she leaves, she'll tell him everything." Ryan stiffened. He hated when she brought up Richard. "She won't. Emily doesn't talk." "Because you've kept her quiet," Chloe replied, her tone sharper now. "But what if she breaks? What if one more fight pushes her to call him? You said her dad is some big CEO. He probably has lawyers, investigators. He could dig into everything. He could ruin us." "Us." Ryan stared at her. For months, he had convinced himself this affair was the start of a new life, one where he wasn't tied down by a wife who needed too much, or a baby who cried too often, or a second child on the way he never wanted. But Chloe wasn't in this for romance. She wanted freedom, money, status, and Emily was in the way. "Then tell me what you suggest," Ryan said coldly. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a calculated calm. "We need something believable. Something tragic. Something accidental." Ryan swallowed. "Like what?" Chloe tilted her head, her gaze drifting somewhere far away. "You know that cabinet she's always worried about? The heavy wooden one, the one she already mentioned to the neighbor? That's perfect. Tall, unstable, old, and she's pregnant and tired. All it takes is one slip. Ryan felt a chill crawl up his spine. And the baby? He asked quietly. Chloe tapped her nails on the table. Collateral damage. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, guilt flickered, but only for a second. Fear of losing everything was stronger. We'll make it look like an accident, Chloe continued, her voice smooth. We pretend to help her reorganize the room. Ask her to reach for something. She leans in. The cabinet shifts. Boom. Tragic, devastating, but believable. Ryan's throat tightened. And if someone asks questions, we cry, Chloe said simply. We panic. We call for help. You'll be the devastated husband who's just lost everything. She smirked slightly. People love a grieving man. A silence settled over them. Ryan stared at the table, breathing slowly. Part of him wanted to back out. Part of him wanted to run. But another part, the part shaped by greed, resentment, and fear, told him this was the only way. She's pregnant, he whispered, almost to himself. Chloe didn't blink. That's why it works. Ryan took a long, shaky breath. The city lights blurred behind him. He picked up his whiskey, finally taking a sip. Fine, he said, voice hollow. We do it tomorrow. Chloe smiled, not warmly, not lovingly, but with satisfaction, the kind that chilled him. As they stood to leave, Chloe placed a hand on his chest. Don't worry, she murmured. By this time tomorrow, everything will be over. But outside, as the night wind brushed against Ryan's skin, something inside him trembled. He glanced back at the bar doors, feeling a flicker of doubt. He had no idea that the real mistake wasn't the plan. It was believing Chloe would stop at Emily, because she had already begun planning his downfall too. The next morning arrived with an unsettling quiet, the kind that made Emily's skin prickle even before she opened her eyes. She felt unusually heavy, her body stiff from worry and the weight of her pregnancy. Noah babbled softly beside her, unaware of the storm waiting downstairs. Emily kissed his forehead, whispering, "Today will be better." She needed to believe it desperately. But as soon as she stepped into the hallway, she knew she was wrong. Ryan was already home. Too early. Way too early. He stood in the living room with an expression stretched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Chloe stood beside him, wearing leggings and a soft pink sweater, her hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, bright, polished, comfortable. Emily felt her stomach twist. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked, adjusting Noah on her hip. Ryan held up a pair of work gloves. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said. "We're finally going to reorganize this room. You've been asking for it." Emily blinked. Her heart beat faster. She had asked him weeks ago to secure the cabinet, to make the room safer for Noah, but something felt off, too sudden, too staged. Still, she forced herself to smile. "Okay, thank you, I appreciate it." Chloe clapped her hands lightly. "We thought we'd help. 3 hands are better than 2, right?" She flashed a sugary grin. Emily nodded, though she felt cold. She watched Ryan pull the cabinet forward slightly, as if checking the back. He turned his head and said, Can you get that box up top? We should sort everything while we're at it." The request made her freeze. The top shelf. The same shelf that required her to stretch. The same one she could barely reach even when she wasn't pregnant. She looked down at Noah in her arms. Her instinct screamed no. Everything inside her told her to stay where she was. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I can help from the bottom drawers." Ryan's eyes flickered annoyance, maybe even impatience. "Come on, Em. We're trying to fix the mess you keep worrying about." Mess. Worrying. She swallowed. "Okay, let me put Noah in his playpen first." She started to turn, but Chloe stepped forward, blocking her path with a soft laugh. "I can hold him," she offered, reaching out her hands. Emily hesitated. Chloe rarely touched Noah. And when she did, she held him like a fragile object she didn't want to be responsible for. But now, she seemed almost eager. "No, it's fine," Emily said. "He's a little fussy." "Emily," Ryan said sharply, "let her help." Her pulse raced. But refusing would escalate the tension, so she gently kissed Noah's head and reluctantly passed him into Chloe's arms. Chloe rocked him awkwardly, as if mimicking something she'd only seen other people do. Ryan stepped back toward the cabinet, giving Emily a tight smile. "Ready?" She nodded, every part of her trembling. She stepped forward and reached up. Her back stretched painfully, her belly pressing against the edge of the cabinet. She could barely graze the box. "Higher," Ryan urged. She lifted onto her toes. I can't. Just a little more." The cabinet creaked. A long, eerie groan. Emily froze. She turned her head just enough to see Ryan shift his weight. Chloe tightened her hold on Noah, not with concern, but with grim anticipation. "Ryan," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't." Her fingertips brushed the box. The cabinet tilted. Her breath caught terror, surging up her spine like fire. "Ryan!" she screamed. He stepped back. Chloe closed her eyes. And the cabinet began to fall. Just as the security camera overhead blinked red and uploaded everything straight to Richard Carter's iPad in Manhattan. 3,000 miles away, on the 42nd floor of a gleaming glass tower on Park Avenue, Richard Carter sat in a conference room preparing for one of the most important meetings of the quarter. His executives were gathering, the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly behind him, silver, powerful, alive. Richard's Mont Blanc pen lay neatly beside his notebook. His iPad was set to sleep mode. Everything was in order, just as he liked it. But then, a small notification lit the corner of the screen. Home security, motion detected, living room. Richard rarely received alerts. Emily had set the system years ago so he could peek in on Noah whenever he missed them. Those little glimpses, Noah giggling on the floor, Emily singing softly as she folded laundry, were the light of his days. He reached for the iPad almost automatically, expecting a harmless scene. He could never have prepared for what he saw instead. The live feed flickered, the image sharpening into view. Richard leaned forward. He recognized the room instantly, Emily's living room, the tall wooden cabinet, Noah's playpen in the corner. But there was tension in the air. A stillness that didn't belong. He saw Emily, pregnant, struggling to stay balanced. One hand reaching upward, the other bracing against the cabinet. He frowned. Why was she stretching like that? Why wasn't Ryan helping? The camera followed Ryan's movements as he casually stepped backward, his expression too calm, too detached. A blonde woman Richard had seen only in a few old photos. Chloe stood behind him, holding Noah. Richard's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He tapped the screen, zooming in. His executives filtered into the room, greeting him politely, but he barely heard them. His eyes locked onto the feed, unable to look away. Emily's face was tense, her movements strained. She mouthed something. Was it Ryan? He couldn't hear. Then he saw it. The cabinet shifted. Just an inch. But enough for Richard's blood to run cold. Emily froze. Ryan didn't rush to steady it. He didn't even reach out. He stepped back farther. Richard's throat tightened. "No, no. What are you doing?" he whispered. He tapped the screen again, enlarging the image. Chloe wasn't panicking. She wasn't trying to shield Noah. She was standing still, almost expectant. A chilling certainty settled into Richard's bones. This wasn't an accident. This was something else. Emily reached higher, too high, too far, her pregnant belly pressing into the wood. Richard saw her lips move again. A plea. A warning. Something. The cabinet groaned. Richard stood up so abruptly, his chair hit the wall behind him. His executives looked startled, but he didn't care. His eyes stayed glued to the screen as the cabinet tilted farther, its shadow swallowing Emily's small figure. "Stop, Emily. Get away from there," he whispered urgently, even though she couldn't hear him. Emily turned, eyes wide with terror. The cabinet fell. It crashed onto her back, her stomach, her legs crushing her beneath its weight. Richard felt the breath tear from his chest. Emily collapsed to the floor, her body curled protectively around itself. Noah screamed in Chloe's arms, but Chloe didn't move to help. Not once. Richard's hand shook violently as he held the iPad. No, 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 no. Ryan stared at Emily with a coldness Richard didn't recognize. He didn't rush to her. He didn't scream. He didn't even bend down. Everything inside Richard shattered. His executive stood frozen as he shouted, voice cracking, raw with panic, "Emily!" He didn't hear their questions. He didn't hear the confusion. He only saw his daughter pregnant, helpless, crushed beneath a cabinet while two people he once trusted stood watching like predators. Richard's voice trembled with fury as he grabbed his phone, his briefcase, his keys. "Cancel the meeting," he barked. Get me the first flight to Los Angeles. Now. His assistant stammered something, but Richard was already storming toward the door. His world had narrowed to one single truth. If Emily survived this, someone would pay. And Richard Carter had just become the most dangerous man Ryan and Chloe would ever cross. The cabinet didn't fall all at once. It came down in a slow, terrible tilt, just long enough for Emily to realize she was about to be crushed and completely powerless to stop it. For a split second, the house fell silent, as if the world around her inhaled. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and she twisted instinctively, turning her body so her stomach, her unborn child, wouldn't take the full force. But there was nowhere to go. The wooden cabinet came crashing down. The impact slammed into her back with a force that stole the air from her lungs. The pain was instant, explosive, radiating up her spine, across her ribs, through her abdomen. Her knees buckled, and she hit the hardwood floor with a scream she didn't even hear. Her ears rang as her vision flickered. Noah shrieked in Chloe's arms, his cry piercing the room like a siren. But Chloe didn't move. She didn't step forward. She didn't even flinch. She just stared down at Emily with a chilling calm, tightening her hold on the baby to keep him from reaching for his mother. Emily tried to breathe, but the weight on her back pressed her chest to the floor. She tasted blood, metallic and warm, in the back of her throat. She clawed weakly at the wood above her, her fingers slipping. Ryan, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Help, please. Ryan stood over her, his eyes dark and unreadable. For a moment, Emily thought she saw fear, but not for her. Fear of being caught, fear of consequences. He didn't drop to his knees. He didn't touch her. He didn't look at Chloe in panic. He simply watched. Emily's breath shuddered. With enormous effort, she shifted her body, curling around her belly to protect the life inside her. The movement sent lightning bolts of pain up her spine, but she forced herself to turn just enough so the pressure on her abdomen eased. Her head throbbed, her vision blurred, her heartbeat hammered so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Noah cried harder, reaching one tiny hand toward her. Emily's heart splintered. She tried to lift her arm to reach him, but her muscles shook violently, the weight pinning her down. Help! Help me! She pleaded again, tears streaking down her cheeks. Chloe stepped forward, not to rescue her, but to stoop low enough to smirk. Look at you, she murmured softly, just loud enough for Emily to hear. So dramatic. Emily stared up at her, horrified. You, Emily choked. You planned this. Chloe tilted her head like she was admiring a piece of art. Ryan said, "You'd be difficult," she whispered, "but I guess even broken things still cling to life." Emily whimpered, her body shaking. "My baby, please." Ryan finally spoke. "Chloe, call 911, he said, but his tone held no urgency, no real panic. It sounded almost rehearsed. "No," Chloe replied, "not yet." Emily's entire body stilled. "What?" Ryan hissed. Chloe's eyes gleamed. "Wait a minute. Accidents take time. If we call too fast, it looks suspicious." Emily felt her heart drop into her stomach. She stared at Ryan, silently screaming for mercy, for humanity. But he only clenched his jaw. "You're insane," he whispered to Chloe, but he didn't move. He didn't help. He didn't rush. He didn't lift the cabinet. Emily felt her strength draining rapidly. Her limbs numbed, her breaths grew thin. She wasn't sure whether it was the pain, the shock, or the crushing weight of betrayal, but the world around her dimmed. The edges of the room blurred. Noah's cries faded, swallowed by the ringing in her ears. Her fingers twitched weakly. Her vision flickered again. But just before the darkness pulled her under, something in her peripheral sight blinked. The security camera. The tiny red light glowed steadily. Recording. Live. A faint spark of hope, small, fragile, but real, cut through the pain. If the camera was on, someone would see her. Someone might save her. Emily exhaled a trembling breath, her voice barely audible. "Dad, please." And in that fading moment, she clung to the one truth Ryan and Chloe had overlooked: her father was watching. And he was coming. For several seconds after the cabinet fell, the house descended into a horrible stillness. The only sound was Noah's terrified wailing, sharp, panicked, desperate. Emily tried to speak, tried to move, but her limbs trembled uselessly. Her breath came in shallow bursts, every inhale burned like fire, her belly throbbed with a strange, terrifying tightness she'd never felt before. Something was wrong, very wrong. Chloe finally placed Noah into his playpen, not out of concern, but because his crying annoyed her. She brushed her hands together as if dusting off something dirty. "Well," she said coolly, "I guess now we call." Emily's heart hammered, her vision blurred, her fingers clawed at the wooden floor as she tried one more time to push herself up. She couldn't. Her strength was dripping out of her like water from cracked glass. Ryan stood frozen, pacing back and forth like a man cornered by his own panic. "We need to make it look real," he muttered, voice cracking. "We need to just help me think." Chloe snapped her fingers. "Think later, call now. Before she passes out completely." A part of Emily almost laughed. They weren't worried she was dying, they were worried she'd die too soon, that it wouldn't look believable, that the timing wouldn't fit their story. Ryan fumbled for his phone, hands shaking. He dialed 911. "This is my wife, she an accident, the cabinet just fell," he stammered, forcing tears into his voice. Emily listened in disbelief. She knew that voice. The fake softness, the trembling act. He had used it countless times on clients, investors, her. Now he used it to save himself. Not her, not their unborn child, just himself. Chloe pretended to cry beside him. "Please hurry," she said in a breathy voice at exactly the right pitch. "She's pregnant, she's bleeding." Emily wanted to scream that she wasn't bleeding until she felt warmth spreading beneath her dress. A cold spike of terror shot up her spine. No, not the baby, not now. Her breathing quickened into short, frantic gasps. She pressed a shaking hand to her stomach, begging it to move, to kick, to give her something, anything. But she felt nothing. Panic swallowed her whole. Then suddenly, a sound cut through the haze. "Emily? Emily, can you hear me?" It wasn't Ryan. It wasn't Chloe. It was Sarah. The front door slammed open so hard it rattled the walls. Emily's fading vision caught a blur of movement, Sarah rushing into the room, dropping her bag on the floor as she took in the scene. "Oh my God, Emily," she screamed, pushing past Ryan, who tried to block her. She knelt beside Emily, voice trembling but steady enough to act. "Stay with me, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm here." Chloe stepped forward. "It was an accident." "Shut up," Sarah snapped, eyes flashing. Then she leaned closer to Emily. "I'm a nurse, okay? I've got you. I've got you." Emily's eyes flooded with tears. "My baby, I can't feel." Sarah's expression changed instantly, panic tightening her features. "Hold on, help is coming." As if summoned, the distant wail of sirens filled the neighborhood, growing louder each second. Red and blue lights flickered through the windows. Tires screeched outside. Paramedics burst through the door moments later. Everything became a blur. Hands lifting the cabinet, voices shouting, a neck brace snapping into place, a stretcher, an oxygen mask, blood pressure calls. The room spun violently. Emily's consciousness slipped in and out like a flickering bulb. She heard Noah crying again. She heard someone yelling instructions. She heard someone else asking questions. But through it all, through the noise, through the terror, through the agony, one voice cut through the chaos like a lifeline thrown into a storm. Richard Carter, her father, on speakerphone. "Tell her I'm coming," he ordered, voice shaking with fury and fear. "Tell her Daddy's coming. Tell her to hold on." Emily's lips trembled. She whispered the last words she could before the darkness swallowed her whole. "Dad, hurry." And as the ambulance doors slammed shut, the real war for Emily's life had just begun. The plane hadn't even left the runway when Richard Carter was already demanding updates. His assistant sat beside him, pale and shaken, holding the iPad that still displayed the frozen frame of Emily crushed beneath the cabinet. Richard couldn't bear to look away, even though every glance felt like a spike driven through his chest. His daughter, his baby girl lying on the floor, begging for help that never came. The image carved itself into him with brutal clarity. "Get Daniel on the line," Richard barked, his voice unrecognizable, thick with fury, cracked with fear. Daniel Brooks, his most trusted attorney, answered within seconds. "Richard? I saw the footage. My God. Is she alive?" "They're operating," Richard said, gripping the armrest so hard the leather creaked. "Internal bleeding. Severe trauma. The baby may. His voice broke, but he clenched his jaw, forcing himself back under control. I want everything ready when I land. Police, legal forms, protective orders, whatever it takes. I'm already on it, Daniel said. But Richard? From the footage? That was no accident. Richard's eyes narrowed. I know. That's why they're going to pay. The flight attendants whispered nervously nearby, unsure what to do with the man radiating the kind of rage that could crush steel. Richard wasn't loud. He wasn't panicked. He was frighteningly calm. The kind of calm that signaled a storm was coming. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, Richard didn't wait for passengers to exit. He stood the moment the wheels touched down and strode up the aisle, ignoring the startled murmurs. His driver was already waiting on the tarmac with a black Mercedes S-Class. Richard climbed in without a word, and the car lurched forward toward the hospital. His phone buzzed nonstop. Updates from Daniel, calls from board members, security alerts, messages from the hospital. Then one message made his heart slam against his ribs. Emergency C-section in progress. Mother critical, baby unstable. Richard closed his eyes, pain ripping through him like lightning. He'd held Emily in his arms when she was born, tiny, pink, fragile. He had promised to protect her for the rest of his life. And now she was fighting for her life, while he was 3,000 miles away. Faster, he told the driver, his voice eerily steady. When Richard stormed into the hospital lobby, the automatic doors barely slid open fast enough. Nurses looked up in alarm as the tall, sharply dressed man approached the front desk with the force of a tidal wave. I'm Richard Carter, he told the nurse. My daughter, Emily Carter, was brought in. I want to see her medical team, now. The nurse stuttered, pointing toward the surgical wing. Sir, she's still in the R. Then bring me whoever is in charge, he said, and call security. Her husband is not to come near her. Understood? The firmness in his tone made the nurse flinch and nod rapidly. A doctor approached moments later, sweat beading his forehead. Mr. Carter, your daughter is in critical condition. She suffered extensive trauma to her spine and abdomen. We're trying to stabilize the baby. Richard swallowed hard. Is she conscious? No, the doctor said softly. We won't know more until she's out of surgery. Richard turned away, his hands trembling not from fear, but from a rage so deep he felt it in his bones. He paced the hallway like a caged lion, each step echoing against the floor tiles. That was when he saw them. Ryan, Chloe, standing together near the vending machines, whispering, laughing. Something in Richard snapped. He walked toward them with a calm that felt colder than ice. Ryan's smile faltered when he saw him. Richard, Ryan began. Thank God you're here. Richard didn't let him finish. He stepped so close, Ryan had no choice but to shrink back. If she dies, Richard said quietly, I will destroy you. Not emotionally, not personally, legally, financially, publicly. I will take apart your life piece by piece until there is nothing left but dust. Do you understand me? Ryan's mouth opened, stammering. It was an accident. No, Richard said. I saw the video. Chloe's face drained of color. Richard leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut skin. You hurt my daughter, and now I will make sure you never hurt anyone again. Before Ryan could respond, a doctor rushed out of the operating room. Mr. Carter, your daughter. She made it through the surgery, but... Richard froze. But what? The doctor took a breath. She's alive, but someone tried to kill her. And Richard knew he was about to burn their entire world to the ground. The door to the recovery wing swung open, and Richard stepped inside with the doctor guiding him. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and stale air conditioning, the kind of cold that seeped into a person's bones. Machines beeped rhythmically in nearby rooms, each one a reminder that lives were hanging in the balance. Richard felt a tightness in his chest, a pressure he couldn't shake, not fear, but a fury so deep it left him trembling. Your daughter is still unconscious, the doctor said, walking briskly beside him. She lost a dangerous amount of blood, and the trauma to her abdomen put the baby under severe stress. Richard swallowed hard, his throat raw. The baby? Is the baby alive? For now, the doctor answered gently. We delivered him early. He's tiny, but he's fighting. Richard closed his eyes, a shuddering breath escaping him. Another grandchild, fragile, born into chaos. Part of him wanted to crumble under the weight of it, but he forced himself upright. Emily needed strength, not weakness. "How long until she wakes up?" he asked. "We don't know. The impact caused swelling in her spine. It's too early to determine the full extent of the damage. What she needs most is time." Time. The one thing Emily had been running out of. They reached her room. Richard hesitated before stepping inside, bracing himself for the sight he feared would break him. When he finally entered, his heart nearly stopped. Emily lay motionless on the hospital bed, pale and still. Her dark hair was pushed back from her forehead, an oxygen tube taped to her cheek. IV lines snaked from her arms. Monitors blinked around her, tracking every fragile beat of her heart. She looked impossibly small, swallowed by the white sheets. Richard's breath hitched. He moved toward her, his fingers trembling as he gently touched her hand. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, voice cracking. "Dad's here now." He sat in the chair beside her bed, gripping her hand with both of his. Memories flooded his mind. Emily taking her first steps, Emily running into his office after school, Emily laughing on her wedding day. How had she ended up like this? How had he allowed it? The guilt was suffocating. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her knuckles. "I should have protected you. I should have known." A nurse entered quietly. "Mr. Carter, the baby has been moved to the neonatal unit. Once you're ready, I can take you to see him." Richard shook his head. "Not yet. I stay with her." The nurse nodded and slipped away. Richard leaned back, exhausted but refusing to leave her side. He reached into his coat and pulled out the Tiffany bracelet he had given her on her wedding day, recovered from her house by first responders. He placed it gently on her wrist, as if trying to restore something she had lost long ago. A soft beep sounded on the monitor. Emily's fingers twitched. Richard jerked forward. "Emily? Baby girl?" Her eyelids fluttered weakly. For a moment, he saw the faintest sign of life returning, then her face tightened, a flicker of panic crossing her unconscious expression. Richard felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Even in sleep, she was afraid. He squeezed her hand. "You're safe now, I promise." But before he could say more, raised voices echoed from the hallway. Arguing. Yelling. Richard's head snapped up. The doctor rushed in, alarmed. "Mr. Carter, stay here, don't move." But Richard was already on his feet. He stepped into the hallway and saw two police officers restraining Ryan, who was trying to force his way past them. "I need to see my wife," Ryan shouted. "I have rights." Chloe stood behind him, pale and fidgeting. Richard's entire body tensed. The officers turned when they saw him. "Mr. Carter," one said, "we've been informed you want them kept away until questioning." Ryan lunged forward. "This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything." Richard stepped forward, eyes cold as steel. "Yes, you did." Ryan's face twisted. "You can't prove." Richard cut him off. "I watched you do it." Silence dropped like a hammer. Ryan froze. Chloe's eyes widened. The officers exchanged a look. Richard leaned in, lowering his voice to a deadly whisper. "And now the law is going to watch it too." Ryan paled. Because he knew the video that was supposed to save him was about to destroy him. The hallway outside Emily's room crackled with tension, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the linoleum floor. Ryan stood stiff between the two officers, breathing hard, his face pale with the realization that his act was beginning to collapse. Chloe hovered behind him, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched as if preparing for a fight she wasn't sure she could win. Richard stepped forward, every inch of him radiating authority. Years of commanding boardrooms, negotiating billion-dollar deals, and staring down competitors had built a man who didn't waver, not in crisis, not in fear, not in fury. Ryan, for the first time, looked terrified of him. You don't understand," Ryan stammered. "The cabinet just fell." "I tried." "No," Richard cut him off softly, dangerously. "What I saw was you stepping back while my daughter begged for help." One of the officers cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we'll need to take formal statements soon. The doctors told us to wait until your daughter wakes up, but from the video you showed us, it's evidence," Richard said firmly. "And I want it logged immediately." Ryan's head snapped up. "What video?" Chloe shot him a sharp look, but it was too late. Panic flashed across her features. "The home security camera," Richard said. "You forgot about the auto-upload feature, didn't you?" Ryan blinked rapidly, blood draining from his face. No, that system was supposed to. Delete files after 30 days? Richard finished. Yes, but not the live stream backups. You never bothered to check the settings. Chloe swore under her breath. The officers exchanged glances, then one of them stepped toward Chloe. Ma'am, we'll need you to remain here for questioning. This is now an active investigation. Chloe's eyes narrowed. Are you kidding? I'm not the one who. You held the baby, Richard said sharply, and you stood there smiling while my daughter was crushed. One officer gently pulled Chloe aside, but her composure began to crack. She ran a trembling hand through her hair. We didn't mean for her to. Don't, Ryan hissed. Don't say anything without a lawyer. Chloe glared at him. Lawyer? You think a lawyer's going to save you after what you did? You told me she wouldn't fight, you said. Richard raised a hand. Let her talk. Chloe snapped her mouth shut. But the damage was already done. The officer nearest them stepped closer. Mr. Carter, we'll need to see the full footage and hear your statement. Richard nodded. Daniel Brooks, my attorney, is on his way. You'll have everything. Ryan's breathing turned erratic. This is a mistake, he said, voice shaky. A misunderstanding. I loved her. I would never. Love? Richard repeated, eyes burning. You don't hurt someone you love. You don't terrorize them. You don't isolate them. And you damn sure don't try to kill a pregnant woman carrying your child. Ryan flinched, his face twisting. Speaking of the baby, the officer added, we need to ask about potential poisoning. The doctors found traces in her bloodstream suggesting. Richard inhaled sharply. Poison? Chloe looked away. Ryan shook his head violently. I don't know anything about that. Stop lying, Chloe snapped. You were the one who said a little medication would calm her down. Chloe, Ryan hissed. But her words hung in the air like smoke. The officers immediately straightened, scribbling notes. Richard felt his hands curl into fists. Poison. A fall. A staged accident. His mind reeled, but his voice stayed controlled. I want a restraining order. Immediate. Neither of them gets within 100 feet of my daughter or grandchildren. We can hold them for questioning, the officer replied. Based on what we've heard, there's enough to keep them here. Ryan lunged forward, desperate. I need to see her. Richard stepped directly in front of him, eyes blazing with a fury Ryan had never seen. You will never see my daughter again, Richard said, voice steep and steady. And when she wakes up, you won't be the father she remembers. Ryan's face crumpled, fear, anger, panic, all mixing like poison. Before he could respond, the door to Emily's room clicked. Everyone fell silent. A nurse stepped out, her expression soft but urgent. Mr. Carter, she's waking up. Richard's breath stopped. He turned slowly toward the door. Everything, the investigation, the anger, the fear, fell away. His daughter was alive. He stepped toward the room. And behind him, Ryan finally realized his entire life was about to collapse just as violently as the cabinet he pushed. The courtroom felt colder than any hospital room Emily had woken up in. Weeks had passed since the cabinet incident, weeks of surgeries, physical therapy, and long nights battling the memory of being crushed while the man she married watched. Her body was healing slowly, but her spirit carried scars that would take longer. Still, she sat upright in her wheelchair now, dressed in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back neatly. Her father, Richard, stood behind her like a wall of steel. Daniel Brooks, Richard's attorney and Emily's former college friend, sat beside them, calmly organizing files. His presence had been a quiet comfort throughout this nightmare. On the other side of the courtroom, Ryan and Chloe sat at the defense table, each with a separate lawyer. But the distance between them was more telling than any lawyer's opening statement. They didn't speak. They didn't look at each other. They were a crumbling partnership held together only by fear. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Emily felt her heartbeat pulse in her ears. The trial began. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice steady. Your Honor, this is not a case about a tragic accident. This is a case about intent, manipulation, abuse, and an attempted double homicide. Ryan flinched. Chloe's jaw clenched. Evidence began to spill into the courtroom like water breaking a dam. First came the home security footage. The monitor flickered. The jury leaned forward. The room held its breath. There was Emily pregnant, holding Noah, reaching for the box. There was Ryan stepping back. There was Chloe, smiling faintly, adjusting her grip on the baby. There was the cabinet tipping forward. The impact. Emily's scream. Noah's cry. The silence afterward. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. A few jurors covered their mouths. Ryan's lawyer tried to block the video from replaying, but the judge allowed it. Twice. Each time, Emily felt the same ache in her chest. Then came the audio analysis. A tech specialist played enhanced sound from the camera. Chloe's whisper. Wait, not yet. Ryan's muttered curse. The faint creaking of the wood before the planned accident. The prosecutor turned slowly toward the defendants. Convenient timing for an unstable cabinet, he said, and even more convenient that neither defendant attempted to help the victim. Chloe broke first. As the prosecutor questioned her, her polished composure cracked. She wiped her eyes dramatically, her voice trembling. I was scared, she said. Ryan told me she'd been unstable. He said she was dangerous. He made me believe she might hurt the baby. I didn't know. You didn't know what? The prosecutor asked. That gravity worked? That a cabinet would crush a pregnant woman? A murmur filled the courtroom. Chloe sniffed loudly. It wasn't my idea. Ryan's head snapped toward her. You were the one who said we needed a plan. He hissed loudly before he realized microphones were on. Mr. Miller, the judge warned. But Ryan was unraveling. His mask was gone. You said she was in the way. You said the insurance money. Enough, Chloe screamed, slamming her palm on the table. You think this was just me? You wanted her gone. You hated her. You said she ruined your life. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged the gavel. Order. Order. Emily sat frozen, trembling as their voices ricocheted off the walls, each accusation cutting deeper and deeper into their own defense. When order was restored, the prosecutor stepped forward calmly. Your Honor, the defendants have just provided the confession we needed. Silence. The judge turned to the jury. You may begin deliberations. It took only 40 minutes. The jury returned. The foreman stood. For the charge of attempted murder of Emily Carter, we find both defendants guilty. For the charge of attempted murder of her unborn child, guilty. For the charge of endangerment of a minor, guilty. Ryan collapsed into his chair, face white as chalk. Chloe let out a high, strangled cry. Richard exhaled for the first time in days. The judge delivered the final blow. Ryan Miller and Chloe Bennett, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A collective gasp filled the room. The gavel struck. It was done. Ryan stared at Emily as officers grabbed his arms. You ruined my life, he spat venomously. Emily looked at him for the first time in weeks, really looked and felt absolutely nothing. No, she said softly. You ruined your own. Ryan was dragged away. Chloe followed, sobbing, mascara streaking her face. Emily felt something inside her finally ease. Justice had come. And now, for the first time since the nightmare began, she could finally imagine a life waiting beyond the pain. The day the verdict was delivered, something inside Emily finally loosened like a tight knot she'd been carrying for years had begun to unwind. She left the courtroom in her wheelchair, sunlight warming her face as she stepped outside with her father behind her and Daniel walking at her side. The courthouse steps stretched downward, but for the first time, in a long while, Emily didn't feel afraid of the path ahead. A new chapter was waiting for her. Months passed. Recovery wasn't easy. There were days she woke up gasping, reliving the crushing weight of the cabinet, the betrayal in Ryan's eyes, the cold smirk on Chloe's lips. But every time she opened her eyes, she saw something else. Her father sitting by her bedside, reading to her. Nurses smiling warmly. Noah giggling in his high chair. Her newborn, Eli, growing stronger in the neonatal unit until he was finally healthy enough to come home. She built her life slowly, carefully, piece by piece. After leaving the hospital, she moved to New York with her children, settling into a serene apartment overlooking Central Park. The city felt like a heartbeat that pulsed life back into her. On quiet mornings, she sipped warm tea by the window while watching joggers pass below and mothers push strollers along the paths. It reminded her that life continued, even after devastation. Her father helped her open a small interior studio, a dream she once abandoned. Now it flourished slowly, tenderly, just like she was. Emily met clients in cozy coffee shops, sketching designs on her tablet while Noah played with blocks and baby Eli slept beside them. Her work gave her purpose again. Her children gave her hope. And then there was Daniel. He never pushed, never rushed. He was simply there. Every court meeting, every doctor appointment, every late-night worry when Emily felt overwhelmed. He was patient, gentle, steady, so unlike the man she once married. He brought quiet laughter into her days again, the kind she thought she had lost forever. One winter afternoon, as snowflakes drifted softly outside the window, Daniel walked into her studio carrying 2 coffees. "You're working too hard," he teased gently, placing one beside her hand. "I'm catching up," Emily smiled. "I lost a lot of time." "You didn't lose it," he said, pulling up a chair. "You survived it." His words hit her heart tenderly. She watched him as he reached over to help Noah stack blocks into a tiny tower. Eli kicked happily in her lap. For a moment, Emily let herself imagine what life could be: steadier, safer, fuller. Weeks later, on a spring evening filled with golden light, Daniel took her to a quiet overlook in Central Park. The skyline shimmered behind them, a symbol of everything she'd fought through. She held Eli against her chest while Noah toddled around her legs. Daniel knelt, not dramatically, not loudly, but softly. "Emily," he said, his voice warm and sincere, "I don't want to replace any part of your past. I just want to be part of your future. Only if you want that too." Emily didn't speak right away. Tears gathered and slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of fear or pain. They were tears of healing. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "I want that." Daniel's eyes softened as he slipped a simple, elegant ring onto her finger. Not flashy, not extravagant, but meaningful. It symbolized peace, safety, love, and the home she never thought she'd find again. Noah clapped. Eli squealed. Richard, who had followed at a respectful distance, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Emily leaned into Daniel, her heart finally unburdened. She had survived betrayal. She had survived cruelty. She had survived being crushed under the weight of a lie. And now she was rising, loved, protected, and whole. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, she whispered to herself, "I'm free." And for the first time, her future felt brighter than her past ever was. And just like that, our story comes to an end. But you, our wonderful friend, if you're still here right now, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a way words alone cannot explain. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it whispered that healing is possible. Or maybe, just maybe, it reminded you that even the darkest storms can lead us to clearer skies. Life isn't always gentle. People betray, hearts break, and trust collapses, just like that cabinet in Emily's home. But as Marcus Aurelius wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Emily's pain didn't end her, she rose because of it. And you can too. You deserve safety. You deserve love. You deserve a life where you can breathe without fear. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply keep going. If this story moved you, made you think, or gave you even a small spark of strength, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not just for us, but so more people can hear stories that remind them they're not alone. We're here with you, walking this road together, one healed step at a time.